The Ottawa Senators have found ways to win without Linus Ullmark. The Calgary Flames are off to a surprisingly hot start, while the Washington Capitals have won 3 straight. What's behind these teams' success? We've got that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. It is great to welcome back to the show the co-host of Sens Central, Locked On Senators, Brandon Pillar. And Brandon, it's been an interesting start to the season for the Senators. They win 3 of their first 5. And yet they do it without their big new acquisition, Linus Ullmark, who has missed some time.
Yeah, certainly Sens fans were very excited when Ullmark was brought to the team. More excited, Gil, when he signed a 4-year extension before even playing a regular season game. And then they get a performance that shows that he's a number 1 goalie in this league for the home opener, helping the Sens win that. Then a not so great performance up against the Montreal Canadiens. And then he ends up being hurt after that game, and he's missed the last 3 games, and the Senators have had to find ways to win without him, and they're able to get a couple wins. They might not have been pretty, but Sens fans are happy enough to take an 8-7 overtime win or a 5-4 regulation win over the Tampa Bay Lightning. We're not apologizing for that.
No, nor should you. And talk to me about Anton Forsberg and the job he's done subbing in for Ullmark.
So Anton Forsberg has had his ups and downs as a member of the Ottawa Senators, mostly downs, unfortunately, lately for the Sens, but he's had to step in with Ullmark being injured, and the numbers haven't looked great. Gil, he's at a 4.16 goals against average and a .863 save percentage, but he was able to shut the door on the Tampa Bay Lightning, who were undefeated before they entered the Canadian Tire Center up against the Sens. And that's all that Sens fans really cared about is, can you get your backup goalie to keep your team in the game? And he did. It was a back and forth 5-4 game up against the Lightning. And then the Lightning really pressed at the end of that game, and he made some key saves, and not only made those saves, but no rebounds, covers it up, allows for line change, allows to slow things down, because everybody knows, sure, the Tampa Bay Lightning is very different from when they were going to cup finals consistently, but they've still got those elite players, the Kucherovs, the Points, the Hedmans, etc., that you have to be worried about, and they're so dangerous. So for the Sens to come up with that win up against the Tampa Bay Lightning, even though it was close, was still a big deal for the Sens.
Tell me about Ullmark's status. When do you think he'll be back, and what will it mean for this team?
So Ullmark has had a strain. They've been very kind of secretive about we haven't even got upper body, lower body, so we're not sure where the strain has been, but it doesn't really matter because it's shelved him for a couple games here. Travis Green mentioned that he could have played earlier, but it seems like they wanted to hold him out for precaution reasons, which I think is the right idea. No sense getting him in too early, and then he tweaks whatever strain it is, and then he's out again. Try to have Forsberg win that game for you, and he did. So Ullmark, in all likelihood, is going to come back for the Ottawa Senators game on Tuesday, which will be their first ever game up against the Utah Hockey Club in Salt Lake City. So nice to get your number 1 goalie back for that. And to give Sens fans even more faith that he's likely going to start that game, the Senators goalie prospect Mads Søgaard was sent back down to Belleville. So clearly they're comfortable enough to ride with 2 goalies on this road trip. That means Ullmark's got to be ready to start, if not Tuesday, sometime on this upcoming road trip where they're in Salt Lake City, Vegas, and Denver.
What has been the key to success? I mean, you win 2 out of 3 and some high-scoring games. How
Oh,
have
yeah.
the Senators been able to do it?
So the Senators have a very high octane offense up front. They're able to score goals. They're able to hang with teams in run and gun style games like that. 8-7 overtime victory up against the LA Kings was an absolute gong show of a game, but the Senators are able to score their way out of problems. Like Forsberg started that game, he gets yanked, and Ahmad Sogard, the goalie prospect I mentioned, he had to go in that game too, and he didn't have a great game either. So they had to outscore their problems on that one, and they were able to do it. And a big reason why they're so successful scoring is the power play. The power play has been clicking for this Sens team. They're actually third in the league in power play percentage at 38.1 and first in the league in total power play goals with 8. So when the Ottawa Senators are able to get the other team into penalty trouble, hopefully agitate them the way this team was designed in the offseason, they wanted to get a little greasier, getting Nick Cousins, who famously apparently has the most punchable face of any NHL player, and they're agitating other teams, and they're able to get the man advantage, and more importantly, they're able to capitalize when they do. So that's been a big reason why, without great goaltending, at least other than the home opener, the Senators have still been able to find ways to win games.
And who are some of the players who have really come through, both on the power play and to get that offense going in general?
Well, Tim Stutzle and Brady Tkachuk and Jake Sanderson are the cornerstones of this team's success. A third overall draft pick, a fourth overall draft pick, and a fifth overall draft pick. So you need them to play well if this team's going to do anything. And luckily, Gil, they're up to 7 points each, and they lead the Ottawa Senators in scoring. You got Tim Stutzle, 3 goals, 4 assists, Brady Tkachuk, 2 goals, 5 assists, and Jake Sanderson, 1 goal and 6 assists. The Senators actually have 5 different players. They're at a point per game pace right now. So their top guys are able to produce right now. And that's kind of the key for the Ottawa Senators, as they're a very top-heavy offensive team, and they lack a lot of stability on defense, unfortunately, especially with Artem Zub, one of their best shutdown physical defensive defensemen. He's been shelved with the concussion that he suffered. So haven't been able to defend and keep the puck out of their net as well. But luckily, the offense is clicking, and it's a lot. It may not be a coach's dream. Travis Green probably stressed out, but for Sens fans, it's made for some entertaining games.
So what's your biggest concern? I mean, we're only 5 games into the season right now, but what has you concerned? What do they need to improve on to remain successful and basically stay in the playoff hunt?
Yeah, when you play a run and gun type game, you can get lucky certain nights and you can outscore your problems, and that can happen. But as a lot of teams know, it's not a sustainable formula if you want to have success over an 82 game season. And more importantly, the Sens are hoping to make the postseason for the first time in God knows how long. I can't even remember the last time they were in the playoffs. 2017, been a while. But if they want to play stable, consistent hockey, they can't rely on the run and gun. So they're going to have to be better defensively. And obviously, you want your defensemen to be better defensively, but I think the forwards are starting to realize too, we're going to have to chip in defensively as well. We're going to need to see better penalty killing. Although the power play has been great, the penalty killing hasn't been that great, and they need more of a balance on special teams if they're going to have success long term. And Ullmark's going to be healthy soon, which is great, and he's poised to really take over as a number 1 starter. He hasn't had the opportunity to do that in Buffalo. He split the net a lot of the time, and then obviously in Boston, famously, him and Jeremy Swayman were one of the league's best tandems, and they split the net too. But Ottawa, he's the number 1 guy. He's the main guy, but can Forsberg be solid? And he's going to have to be better than he's been lately when Ullmark needs those breaks on back-to-backs or during long road trips or things like that. So really the main things is the team's going to have to tighten up defensively, and they're going to need good performances from their backup goalie.
All right, Brandon, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you and your co-host on social media?
Yeah, so you can find us on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it these days. I can't help but call it Twitter, so I'm calling it Twitter still. At Sens Central. You can find me at Brandon Pillar 1, and we're on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Daily show, your team every day. You know that already. And we can't get enough of Sens hockey content, Gil. So we're doing the postcast as well after every single game. You have us going live for Ottawa Senators postcast, where you can hop in the chat. You can mix in some questions if you got burning questions you want to ask Ross or I, and we do the postcast after every single game live on YouTube.
Brandon, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/locked-on. Just go to Indeed.com/locked-on right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Flames, Jess Belmosto. And Jess, you've got to be happy with this surprising 4-0-1 start.
I am thrilled. I think that they really have outdone themselves, and this is really the start that they needed to get off to after the off season that they had. It was kind of like, let's get the morale up, and if we do losing, let's do it later.
Let's start with goaltending, because that was a big question. You trade Jakob Markstrom over the offseason. How have they been doing in goal, and who's been getting the job done?
Yeah, so Dan Vladar and Dustin Wolf have been going every other game, and they've both been phenomenal. Jakob Markstrom's actually kind of struggling in New Jersey. So, I mean, it's working out for the Flames, I would say. Dan Vladar has been excellent, which I don't think a lot of people, including myself, necessarily expected, just because he's never had the workload of a starter. And obviously, with this being Dustin Wolf's first full season in the NHL, I would say he's adjusting quite nicely.
Have you seen anything different from Vladar that has made the difference this season so far?
I think he's more calm. He looks more focused, and the defense in front of him isn't as strong as it was last year or years before. So I don't know if it's, him maybe having to be more focused and locked in there, but he's always at the ready. I haven't really seen him look unprepared.
And then offensively, let's start with the power play. They have been off to a really solid start, more than 29% success rate, 6th right now in the NHL.
If you told me that was going to be the case, I would have laughed. I don't necessarily think anyone really enjoyed their power play last year. And then Andrei Kuzmenko has been such a huge addition since the trade deadline. And just really, as a whole, they've been able to kind of regenerate and jumpstart that power play.
How about Jonathan Huberdeau? I mean, 6 points in 5 games. Not a bad start for him.
No, absolutely not. And it's so funny because, everyone's been trying to figure out, how do you unlock Huberdeau? How do you get Florida Panthers, or close to it, Jonathan Huberdeau back? And it just took Anthony Mantha and Martin Pospisil to make that happen. And, it's great to see, because obviously he's struggled with his confidence because of the drop in production, and it's nice to kind of see him have his groove back and get it back into the swing of things and kind of have his swagger back.
Who has been the biggest surprise for you outside of the goaltending, who, has really contributed to this hot start?
I would say Jonathan Huberdeau, but I'm going to say probably Matt Coronado. He had a good camp, but Sam Honzik beat him out for a roster spot, and Coronado was still sticking around with the team. He wasn't playing with the Wranglers, but he's been able to come in and make huge contributions. He had a really big game against Edmonton last weekend, and then he had a 2-goal game earlier this week, and it's just been very I don't want to say surprising, but it's just nice to see him stepping up and really taking this opportunity seriously.
Is this sustainable, and what will it take to sustain it?
I think anything is possible with this group. This team in general, like the work ethic and just the philosophical reasoning and everything that goes into the organization is you don't quit. You don't pack it in no matter how bad of a season you're having or how bad you're doing personally, like individually on the ice. You're showing up every day. And I think that that's kind of what drives them, is this underdog mentality and, being underestimated night after night, all off season. I think it's going to really depend on everyone's health. Igor Sharangovich hasn't played a game yet. He's still on IR. Kevin Rooney's working his way back. And now Sam Honzik is out, considered week to week. So if they can stay healthy and stay right, then I think that that's the key there.
What is your biggest concern about this team? I mean, yeah, okay, good start, only one overtime loss so far, but what has you concerned?
I would say them burning out too quickly. It is a very long season, and I don't think this is not something that I see lasting all season long. Obviously, I think they're going to fall into that rut eventually, and I don't want to see that happen like a nosedive. I'm concerned about them maybe getting too ahead of themselves and start trading for players and being buyers versus maybe selling and diverting from the 3 to 5 year rebuild plan.
Who have some of the leaders been on this team? I mean, obviously with the expectations being a little bit down over the offseason, there had to be some leadership to get this team off to this good start. Who has stepped up?
Yeah, so Michael Backlund's the captain, and he spent his whole career with the Flames. So I think that he's well versed in this kind of underdog, kind of no one expects us to win sort of role, as well as Huberdeau, Kadri, Blake Coleman is someone that is highly respected in the room, and even Ryan Lomberg, who was an off-season signing, has come in and been a real just presence in the locker room and someone that can pull you up by your bootstraps and keep you going.
Talk to me a little bit about the blue line, because we haven't really mentioned them yet.
Yeah, so I was very concerned about the defense at the end of last season. I did not have any idea how they were going to move forward with what they had. But they did make some adjustments and, adding Kevin Ball from the Jakob Markstrom trade, Jake Bean, and getting Rasmus Anderson and Mackenzie Weegar on their regular sides, I think has been very helpful. And just being able to help out the goaltending, because I did not foresee any of that happening. I just thought it was going to be all on Vladar and Wolf.
Biggest key to a successful season?
Keeping all the noise out. They do a very good job of that. And that's something that they talk about constantly. Like everything that they're doing is from internal reasoning and rationale. And I think that that's good because, I mean, what do people who don't work that and aren't around it all the time, like what do they truly know that's going to magically fix the team? But I think that just keeping, nose to the grindstone and just kind of like just pushing forward, keeping that underdog mentality there.
All right, Jess, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yes, so you can find Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And you can follow me on Twitter at Jess Belmosto.
All right, Jess, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you could start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you could check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And look, this is the best time of the year for sports and sports betting. You've got baseball playoffs in full swing, college football, pro football in the middle of their seasons. Hockey is underway. Pro basketball is getting underway. So much. Check out all the odds for your favorite teams at FanDuel's website right now. Just, again, get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Head over to FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The Washington Capitals are on a winning streak right now, and Dan Holme of Locked On Capitals joins us to discuss how they're getting it done and what the keys are going forward for this team to maintain this success. We've got that and a whole lot more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Capitals, Dan Holme. And Dan, nice start for the Washington Capitals. What is it now, 3 wins in a row?
3 wins in a row, and they got off to a bit of a slower start. Game 1, I mean, we're still at the beginning of the season, but Spencer Carberry wasn't afraid of taking the lines and putting them in a blender, and ultimately that is why the Capitals are in the position that they're in. We see the second line playing very well with PLD and Tom Wilson, who has scored 5 goals in 4 games. That there's a lot to love as a Capitals fan.
So talk to me about Tom Wilson. What has been the key to his fast start?
Well, what they did this season is they moved him to the second line. In previous seasons, he had spent time on the top line right wing. So he's playing second line right wing with PLD, Pierre-Luc Dubois at center, and Connor McMichael at left wing. And a change this season due to injury as they have Dylan McIlrath on the blue line, who is a notorious tough guy. And I think it takes a lot of the pressure off Tom Wilson of being that tough guy. One of the things that I heard him say in another podcast is he starts to realize the older he gets that I'm better served being out on the ice than in the penalty box, that I don't have to fight every guy in the league, that if you are a fourth liner AHL call-up that's trying to make a name for yourself, I don't need to fight that battle anymore. I've been in the league for a long time. So he's concentrating on what he does best, and that's score goals. He's not a Reeves. He's not a Rempe. He's a legitimate goal scorer.
Talk to me about Dylan Strome. He's off to a really nice start as well.
Yeah, just doing what he does best, playing on that top line center position with Alex Ovechkin and Alexei Protas, and just has a really high hockey IQ, sees the ice very well. And I take a look at the last game in particular. It's just the coaching. Everything is firing on all cylinders with his team. I saw that it was Alexei Protas and Alex Ovechkin screening him and Dylan Strome driving it home. It's just, that's the biggest thing. He has a good shot. He has a great hockey IQ, like I said, and just a really great all-around hockey player.
You talked about the goaltending. What's going on there, and how is it working out so far?
Well, it's an interesting battle, to be clear here, as we take a look at Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren, both netminders entering into contract years, or this is the last year they're under contract. And the number 3 netminder, this is where the plot thickens. Hunter Shepard, well, he is also in a contract year, and it is ultimately bringing out the best in those respective netminders. We see Logan Thompson playing huge, Charlie Lindgren playing huge, and the Capitals at the end of the day, well, they're reaping the benefits of all of that. And it's an interesting thing. As I went into this season and I looked at the netminding situation, I saw, well, Darcy Kemper got traded out to the Kings. This is going to be an excellent opportunity for Hunter Shepard. But we take a look at former GM BMAC. He was able to get a 30,000 look view of this team, widen the lens and say, hey, we know that Charlie Lindgren was good last season, but is he going to be another great netminder this coming season? And if not, that's going to put a tremendous amount of pressure on Hunter Shepard, who's a bit of an unproven commodity. So they traded for and acquired Logan Thompson, 2 great netminders for under $2 million. I'm loving it. And the Capitals, I think, are in a really great position. And if one of them gets injured, their pipeline in net, we have Hunter Shepard and Clay Stevenson. The Capitals are sitting in a good position.
Gotta love organizational depth. So obviously you got to be pleased with the 3 straight wins, but what is your biggest concern about this team after 4 games?
Well, I'm riding a high after the last game. Tom Wilson, OT winner. I'm pumping my fist. However, the Capitals gave up 2-goal leads a couple times in the game. That's something that needs to be cleaned up. Now, to be fair here, this is a really good New Jersey Devils team. Markedly better with Sheldon Keefe pushing the buttons, pulling the strings there, that I think that, the Capitals should have played better. If I'm going to cut them some slack, it's that they were playing the Devils and that they're a really good team. So they're just going to have to find a way to overcome. And also, if I had to pick another thing that needs to get cleaned up is the power play. You have to make the most of those opportunities. And it's the analytics earlier in the season that we don't necessarily look at, the PP, the PK. But as you get later in the season, you start to look at the season and go, that would have been a game that we would have won had we scored a PP goal. Or if we would have killed off that penalty, we would have won this game. So special teams is something that necessarily isn't glaring in the beginning of the season. But as we get longer and longer into the season, it becomes more apparent that you need to clean those things up. If you're on the power play, score a goal, kill off the penalties. It's all basic stuff. But those are a couple of the things that the Capitals need to clean up. Maintaining leads and working better on the PP.
Give me the name of a guy who has been a pleasant surprise this year so far, but who is kind of flying under the radar nationally.
Well, we take a look at it, and it's a player that isn't on the big team right now, but I think will be at some point, and that is Ivan Miroshnichenko, who is killing it for the Hershey Bears, has scored 5 goals in 5 games to start the season with Hershey. Now, this was a guy that was cut very late, just based on the fact that we had Jacob Vrana. That would be another name, I guess I would add to that mix as well. That I think that as soon as an injury happens or there's any deficiencies or shortcomings in play, we'll see a call up by Ivan Miroshnichenko, a great scoring forward, that I think another step forward for the Capitals. It's interesting as we take a look at this, and I was talking to you just last season about how this is one of the oldest teams in the league That's changed a lot in the offseason, and that was due in large part with TJ Oshie going on the LTIR, Kuzi terminating his contract, Nick Backstrom going on the LTIR, that, wow, we got some money to spend. And the Capitals made the most of that by picking up big names, PLD, Chikrin, Logan Thompson, these kind of players, Matt Roy, that the Capitals are in an excellent position. And I think optimism surrounds this organization more so this year than it has in the last few years. So as a Capitals fan, I'm really riding a high with how this team's doing it. They have a couple tough games coming up against the Flyers back to back. So I'm hoping that they can keep this winning streak going and Tom Wilson can do something crazy and score another goal.
Obviously, got to ask about Alex Ovechkin watch. He is chasing Wayne Gretzky's all-time NHL goal record. 4 games in, 1 goal, 3 assists. So he's a point-a-game guy still. But talk to me about how he looks so far, and has the switch from the left side to the right side affected his offensive game?
It has to an extent. He's chipping in with the assists. As we saw, he got his 700th assist. So he's knocking down all these milestones between here and Gretzky. So at the end of the day, wow, the accomplishments. But, I'm not going to worry about it too much. And the goal that he did get this season, last game, wasn't a pretty goal. It bounced off him, a Devils player, and into the back of the net. And he's like, I guess I'll take it. But one of the things that John Carlson and Tom Wilson said is never doubt the big man. I was talking with you about this last season about Alex Ovechkin getting off to his slowest start goal scoring wise in his entire career. Ended the season, all things considered, pretty good. So it's really early. I do expect that to chip in at some point. But one of the things I know for sure is switching him over to that right wing is trying to give the opposition some different looks. I think that him slamming home the puck from the left dot on the power play is predictable. The netminders are set up for it. And at 39 years old, I don't think that shot is quite as lethal as it once was. So I think they're trying to shake up the snow globe a little bit and give the opposition some question marks. And what is he going to do? It's been some great hockey to watch. And hey, he's chipping in with assists, and all things considered, still some great hockey to watch by OV.
All right, Dan, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And of course, the podcast is available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube.
All right, Dan, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
Great talking with you.
I want to thank everybody who makes Locked On NHL your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank my guests, Brandon Pillar of Locked On Senators, Jess Belmosto of Locked On Flames, and Dan Holme of Locked On Capitals. I'm Gil Martin. I host the Monday edition of Locked On NHL, and I also co-host the Friday edition along with Rachel Donner. Don't forget, we are here every day, Monday through Friday, bringing you the biggest stories from around the NHL, so make sure you join us for that. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and of course, thanks for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL podcast.